The Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. Tonight we are talking about how to define ourselves. How do you define you? And there's so many different ways that we all go about defining ourselves, finding value in who we are, and assigning our worth effectively. There's so many different modalities of success. And we each have so many different reasons why different things are important to us. There was a moment today where I realized how much I had been assigning my worth to something that I had no idea. And it was only after kind of being questioned in a kind way, but just being challenged actually at two different points today. I had two different conversations with two friends, and we were just talking about identity and talking about worth and what is the key metric of success. And there's multiple metrics of success, and especially when we think about our lives, there's different categories and different buckets of what success means for us. For relationships with family, relationships in business, our business goals, our financial goals, there's different metrics that define success for us. But when it comes to defining you and me, where do we place our identity? And where are we really deriving our meaning and deriving our worth? And for one friend in particular, we were talking about how much subconsciously we assign worth or even just identity. Again, identity and worth is different. Worth is, do I have value? Do I matter? Do I belong? Whereas identity is like, this is who I am. This defines me. And so, talking more so about the latter of what defines us, it's a lot of times what we do on a regular basis. And one of the things that I've done very routinely and regularly throughout the last 4 years has been travel. And as I look at this upcoming year, 2026, I actually really want to pull back in terms of travel. And that's a big thing that I've been doing. And my friend actually mirrored back to me. He was like, you everyone knows that you travel. Like, everyone's always kind of like, where in the world is Christene? And that's a joke that people have. And as he was talking, I just realized, I was like, I think I actually I I know that that's a shtick. I know that that's something that is just unusual that I've done for the last 4 years. And so I started leaning into the question of identity. How has travel related to how I define myself? How has it subconsciously done that? Because for me, what I really like to do is pursue questions that I don't know answers to about myself and just see, is there something there that could actually be brought into my own awareness to ensure that it doesn't hinder me from moving forward? So, one of the things that is very clear for me in 2026 is that the way for me to grow, the way for me to get to the next level is by being disciplined, is by being predictable in my life. I have been the farthest thing from predictable. In October, I booked a trip to Rome to meet my parents and my younger sisters for a cruise a week beforehand. And like, I've loved the freedom and loved the flexibility to be able to do that. And so the thought of not traveling, the thought of putting in predictable habits and behaviors, there's a fear there. And I realized that there's a fear of getting bored, and there's a fear of, well, what does boredom then say about me? And what's funny? Even as I say this now, I'm getting, like, I can feel a little pit in my stomach even as I'm talking about it, because there's still some stuff there that I think might be unresolved still. And part of the process of coming to know ourselves is exploring, kind of like pulling on the thread. When you've got a sweater and you see a little thread out of alignment, you pull on it. All of a sudden, it keeps going and going and going, and you're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know all that was going to come apart." And not every thread does that, but some threads do. And so as I just am kind of pulling on this thread very gently around travel and how much that has been incorporated into who I am now, I realize that I'm a little curious and nervous about what will happen when I pull on that thread hard and I take away and just completely remove travel. And again, as I say that, even now, again, I'm feeling a little queasy in my stomach. And just processing now with you guys, because part of the work of knowing is being able to pull on those threads and be brave and lean into what we'll find and look in the mirror and experience the discomfort of that rather than like, oh, I don't like feeling uncomfortable, I'm going to stop. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to find when I do continue to pull on this thread? Because there is a part, and I don't know to what extent yet, but there's a part where travel has been um, a sense of comfort for me. And what I realized in talking to my friend is that it actually was the physical manifestation of freedom. And I hadn't known freedom really. Like I grew up in a very Christian conservative environment. And then I got married at 20 years old. And I never was truly free beyond that which, how does everyone else want me to live? And so when I kind of got my life in a very messy place, but I got my life kind of under my control. The way I chose to live it was by traveling. And so now I'm coming into this season where I'm like, I actually am going to stop traveling. And what then will I choose? This question of how then will you live? How then will I execute my life and who will I be? And so there's kind of like this new season and when we are standing at I'm just kind of envisioning now even as I'm talking I'm seeing almost like this new season and we're standing right at the beginning of it and once we got our backpack on we're ready for the journey and then the first step eh, that's the biggest and the hardest one so often. And then once you get into a groove it's easier to go. And I remember that first step that I took back in 2022. It was right after my husband decided he wanted a divorce. And I was like, okay, I've got this life that I'm holding the pieces of it. What do I do? And that was actually the very first time that I took the step to travel and like take the risk effectively. I had no idea what was going to happen. I decided to fly across the country to California from Washington, D.C. and pursue a potential business venture. And then from there, I flew to New York and met the former CEO of Calvin Klein. And then I went down and to Puerto Rico and went to Miss World USA or Miss World pageant. And then I went on from there and then I went to speak in Prague and it was just like such an adventure. And I remember that moment though in 2022, I was actually at my parents' house and my whole world was falling apart. And yet I was being given this opportunity professionally where it's like all I ever wanted was my personal life, my husband and children and a family. And all of a sudden that's being completely like demolished and I'm being given this opportunity to pursue something professionally. And I just remember sitting there and I told my dad, I was like, I feel like I have talons of fear in my back, like holding me, preventing me from moving forward because I have no idea what will happen. It is so outside of my comfort zone. It's so beyond anything I've ever seen anyone close to me do. Everyone that I knew, they were either married, settled down, or working very safe corporate jobs. I didn't know any entrepreneurs. I didn't know anybody who was trying to do business. I hardly knew anybody who was divorced. And I was looking at this like new frontier of life and I just felt terrified. Like what will happen? What will people say? And I just was I felt almost paralyzed at the thought of and the fear of what people would think. And it wasn't even that I was afraid so much for myself, it was just like, what what will other people think? And what that showed me was how much I was so oriented towards looking to the right and to the left and being like, "What is everyone gonna think?" And I never realized how much that was like my compass was navigating east and west. And I had no idea who I wanted to be. I had no idea what I really wanted other than this future and this life that I couldn't have anymore. That was the one thing that I tried at and it was crashing and burning in front of me. So now as I stand in this new season, it's interesting, y'all. Once we get really comfortable with something, that's usually when it's time to move out of it. Once we become comfortable, once we become complacent, dare I say, that's when it's time to get to the next level. And usually, getting to the next level, the only way to get there is through the pathway of growth. And so, when we think about this question, how do we define ourselves? It is when we become so comfortable and so complacent with the things that are our definitions of ourselves that maybe that's the sign that it's time to shed that layer and continue to go deeper and deeper. And not even deeper, but up. Like, I just know, I feel it in my inner being that for me to really get to the next level in my calling, in my life, is for me to cultivate discipline. And I know also that in the past, when I look at, I talked about this last week, when I sit and look at my life thus far, the peaks, the times when I have been most successful, the times I've been most impactful for myself and for others, it is when I am on my habits, when I'm waking up at 4, when I'm doing the gym first thing, when I'm doing my vertical alignment, which is my time in the morning to make sure that my compass is navigating north rather than east and west, because that is my autopilot to be navigating, looking to everyone around me to tell me who to be, how to show up. And so that's my MO, that's my modus operandi. And so I actually need to intentionally reorient, re-navigate. And so mornings are the most important time for me. And so I know that when I'm most impactful, it's when I'm waking up. And so I can't be switching time zones every couple of weeks, which is what I've been doing the last 4 years. So because of those two things, I know that I need to be more disciplined. And I know that when I'm most disciplined, that's how my mornings look. All right, now I know the pathway for me. But the consequence of that is relinquishing this thing that I really, really have loved, and this thing that actually has served as a manifestation of freedom. And so when I think of giving up travel, the discomfort I feel, like the kind of the gut feeling, why is that there? And so whenever you and I feel that sense of discomfort, that's our signal to go inward. That's our signal to pull on the thread and be like, why do I feel this way? And there's usually something from the past that's showing up today. And when we feel discomfort, when we feel anger, even, usually that's a sign that there's a value that's being called into question, something that we really, really care about, or that there's a wound there. And so for me, I'm seeing that there is a real value that I hold around freedom. There's a real value that I hold around the power of choice. You and I get to choose how we live. And so, because so much of my new life, so to say, this power of choice, this power of freedom, this power of walking in the fullness of experiencing life, I have only ever done that within the confines of travel. So if I was to remove travel, can I still implement those values and choose to be this person that frankly I really really love and that I want to continue to live vibrantly? So how do I do that within the confines of kind of a normal structure? And so that's really what I'm going to be focusing on this upcoming year, is that rather than having the external elements be defining aspects of who I am, it's the internal. So freedom is a defining aspect, not travel. And for each one of us, each one of our values, sometimes it's easier to actually look at the external things that we really care about. So, for example, if you love going to the gym, if you love watching movies, if you love comedy, like how do each one of those external habits underneath reveal something about you and me that is highly personal and highly precious about you and I, that is a core value to who we are. And then when someone says, "Hey, who are you?" You can say, "I am someone who just treasures joy. I love laughing." And the way that that shows up is I actually love going to comedy shows, or I love watching TV. For me, I really value freedom. I really value taking up the power of choice, which Viktor Frankl, who's the author of Man's Search for Meaning, called the greatest of all human freedoms, which is choice. And so each one of our values often shows up in things that make us angry, or things that can actually like make us feel uncomfortable when something happens and you're like, oh, I feel stuck. It's like we're activated, our nervous system gets activated, and usually there's a value there. There's a value that's either being threatened, or a value that needs to have additional light being shown on it to really come to its fullness and full understanding. Because sometimes there's shame wrapped around those values, because we've never taken the time to really understand it to begin with. And so, what may feel like or sound like anger might actually be a part of us that has never been given a voice before, to say, this matters. This is actually so important to me. And by taking the time to become aware of it, we then understand it and we can express it and take action accordingly. But first step is awareness. And that's actually the first step of emotional intelligence, which is to cultivate this ability to sit with and be aware of what is going on inside of us. It's like we've got these clues. Our emotions are clues around key points about who we are. So if we're ignoring our emotions, we're ignoring parts of ourselves. And in the sitting with and becoming aware of those emotions, we come to also become aware of ourselves. So, with that, I'm just going to take a quick moment and check into the chat and say hello. Um, I am down at the very, very bottom, so I'm sorry. I'll scroll back up to the very beginning of the chat. Um, but I just saw Sauce Dupe Will, yeah, romantic comedies. I love rom-coms. I am such a big fan. Okay, so some of my favorites, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, just such a classic. Uh a- as we life what is it? Life as We Know It. It's so funny. Something just go with it. Just Go With It is hysterical. Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston. What's the one, with another it's another Adam Sandler, of course, and, uh, they go to Africa on a safari. It's so funny. What's her name? Um, she was in the movie where she gets amnesia, another one with Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler's been in a lot of good rom-coms. It's so funny. Matthew McConaughey too. But I love those rom-coms, romantic comedies is funny. Lily, thank you for joining. Chuck, good to see you. Frito. All right, just going back up. I love that comment. Saul, good to see you. Mm, Code uh, Bebop, you said you can be whoever you want to be as long as you don't infringe on the rights and spaces of others. It's so funny. I actually think that there's so much opportunity for us to really just reorient our focus on ourselves, because from that point of us filling up our own cup and us actually taking the time to really invest in ourselves, we then love better. So it's not investing in ourselves, drawing up boundaries, cutting people off for the purpose of, honestly, selfishness, but it's for the purpose of love. I actually can love better and give better when I'm coming from a place of fullness. And that fullness is on the heels of taking that space in the morning to get vertically aligned. That's pulling every part of me into alignment vertically under my own ideals, under the divine of who God says that I am and who do I want to be. And for those of you who are interested, verticalalignment.com, you can go to that domain, and I have 21 days of just exercises, prompts that I created actually on my birthday last year. And it's just my gift to you. Um, Christopher Adams, good to see you. In terms of free choice, you recommend First Peter 2, verse 16. I'll go check that out. I'm not sure what that says, but I'll go check it out. Chuck, good to see you. Eyes opened. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Um, Let me just see. I want to see who else is on here. Owerty. Yes, I'm on multiple channels, so I am live a couple different places. Um, mm, DJ Lovehouse, good to see you. Um, hmm, just looking through some of these chats. Um, DLib, I just saw your chat. I think it's so interesting. Around travel. That's part of the reason why I actually wanna just stay put for a bit, and just really establish a cadence of predictability, even just in terms of work execution, like always sending the newsletter the same time every day. And there is something that actually breeds a sense of reliability and trust when there is the normal pace and cadence of things, and so I don't regret anything from the last 4 years of travel. It's been really life-giving. And what I found, this is something that's really interesting, because I actually was challenged on this point. I was on a podcast, and the host he just challenged me, and I loved it. It was a really, really good conversation. What I found was every single time I boarded a plane, went to somewhere new, I found myself in a new environment and found myself asking and kind of operating as a third party to my own existence and being like, "Wait, why did I do that? Why is it that I reacted the way that I did? What is that stemming from?" Because when we're in our space of normalcy, we don't get as triggered. We don't get as activated. Everything's normal. We're used to it. We've curated the perfect little existence that we so choose to abide in. And very rarely do we get disrupted. And so, by intentional disruption, picking ourselves up, putting us into a new environment, we actually get to be jostled around and toss it a little bit, and then we get to see what we're made of. It's like removing the level of comfort and choosing the discomfort of something that's new. And rarely do we actually get completely new environments, new people, new food, new culture, I can't actually speak the language. What am I going to do? There's so much that comes in that experience that really forces almost like a maturing of our personhood, and also an examination of it. Why am I operating that way? We get to see the programs that frankly we otherwise maybe wouldn't see because we're in the same thing every day. And so I'm on the vein now where I actually need to pursue the same thing every day to see, okay, can I actually keep my word to myself? Am I going to continue to wake up at this time because I could do that when I was on the road? But what about just being home where it is normal, where it is, God forbid, boring? And can I find meaning in the ordinary? And I have in so many ways. And can I do it to this extent? Because here's what I don't want to do. The majority of my 20s, I was married. And then my 30s so far, I've been living this very, very fun life. So I'm like, okay, this is a test, this is going to be hard. And I think it's exactly good and right to put myself in a hard position. When I first started out on the journey of cultivating emotional intelligence, it was so uncomfortable. And now I actually find that it's now more comfortable for me to talk about that conversation rather than to jump on here and talk business. It's actually, I'll go get up on stage and talk about business because that's what I do. When I get on a podcast, I'll talk about business. But when I get on the Knowing Show, it's like, let's talk about emotional intelligence. I just love it so much. So now it's like, let's flip the script. Let's actually start getting on stage and talking about emotional intelligence, and then getting on the show and talking about business, and then not traveling. It's like everything that I do that becomes normal on a pretty regular cadence, I just want to flip the script a little bit, just change things up, just make it a little bit more different. Even earlier today, I was actually on the Craft and Calling podcast live. And this is a podcast specifically for folks in the trades and construction industry. And there is so much overlap in the way that we show up in the boardroom. It's very similar in the way that we show up in the bedroom. There's not a ton of difference. If we're not able to fundamentally be vulnerable with ourselves, with our partner, with our board of advisors, it is going to be so impossible for us to get to the next level in business and ourselves personally as a leader, much less so our own healing. It's like layers, that all come back down when we look at the layers of who we are in business, and then who we are in relationship, and then who we are alone. So I really, really love this concept of really putting ourselves in different environments that challenge us to look in the mirror. It's like shining a light on the dark places. And the dark places doesn't mean it's bad. The dark places are, oh, I haven't been there in a while. What is in there? And so that's part of this season of life for me. Brian, good to see you. Thanks for subscribing. Foxy, good to see you. Dr. Drew or Mr. Drew, I'm happy you're here. Count me in. Lendl Jr., good to see you. Willie, Kelly, or Kel, I guess. I did. I just put some names in the chat to say hi. Good to see you guys. All right. I'm going to go back down to the most recent chat. Brian, tell me where you are, Brian, because I'm going to be forming a community here pretty soon. And I was talking with some folks the other day, and we were talking about just having different conversations and channels in the community. And frankly, I'd like to do some in-person events. I've been hosting knowing dinners around the country at various points, and the knowing dinners have been so meaningful, such good conversations. And then the other day I hosted a business lunch where it was for folks in the trade. My family has a 100-year-old painting business, and I just freaking love my dad, and so I've been really getting involved there. So I'm doing some in the business side, and then also on the knowing side. QWERTY, I think that's how you say your name. I've got a couple different chats going, so I'm reading them all, but you guys might not see each other. So Brian, you're from Texas. QRD, I'm wondering where you're from. San Antonio. My brother's from San Antonio, or he lives there now. And you should, if you're in San Antonio, go to Gather Brewing. Two of my dearest friends opened that brewery. It's so fun. But honestly, it'd be fun to do something in person. If you go to ChristeneMarie.com, I'm trying to think of what form you would fill out. But I need to do this. I need to create some kind of a form or something so that we can actually stay in touch. And then that way, when I go, I'm planning to be in San Antonio, I think over Easter. So it'd be fun to do a knowing dinner. But yeah, guys, put in the chat if you guys want to do something in person someday, and I'll do an event. Christopher, you said Socrates famously said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." This speaks volumes on the premise of applied ethics. Love that. I think he also said, like, the most important thing we can do is know thyself. And y'all, this is why we're here. Every morning we've been going live and talking about we've been talking about A Course in Miracles. We've been moving through that workbook together and just going through one lesson a day. And that's kind of like the mental playground, the gym of our mind to work out the muscles and actually try to cultivate new programs and new ways of thinking. And tonight on the show, this is really where we go through on the emotional intelligence side of how do we cultivate those tools and the ability to think something new and the ability to interact new. I'm just looking here at Brian. You said deal. I love it. I'll figure out. I'll figure out kind of the best pathway to do that. But I think that would be fun. What did you say, Smithy? I do have. I have a branding and marketing business, and then also a digital marketing business for trades companies. The Dread Pirate Rob, you said 100-year-old painting business. My grandpa has one of those. I love that. You said a cow business. Does he do heads of cattle? I think that's so cool. My sister-in-law, she married my brother who lives in San Antonio, and her family has, I think it's 2,000 acres, and they do sheep rearing. So they sell the sheep both to eat, but then also the wool. It's so funny. Growing up, my grandparents had not a ton of animals, but chickens, a horse, a donkey. What else did they have? A goat, a sheep. The sheep was really mean. Yeah. So it's funny growing up though, because a lot of friends who are in the city have like never seen livestock. So it's fun to actually grow up with that environment. I think that that's a real pleasure. Ravine, good to see you. Thank you for coming on here, Frito. Thank you for joining. Minash, good to see you. Neurology doctor in New York City. Wow, thank you. I feel like that's like a thank you for your service type of message. Y'all, thank you so much for joining tonight. This conversation around how do you define you, I think it's really important for us to consider, how do we define ourselves? What are the values that we want to define ourselves in principle? And then how do they show up in practice? Because a lot of times we'll have great principles, great thoughts of how we want to be, who we want to be, but then they don't actually translate into the way that we live our lives. I was talking with a friend today and they were like, yeah, my ex-wife talked it was great what she said, but her life didn't reflect that. And so where is there a lack of congruency between what we say and what we do? And then how can we draw some real parallels? And that's where this is the great time to just take a quick audit. What does actually get you upset? What does get you uncomfortable? Because if we lean into those and pull the thread, there's probably a couple stories there and at the core values that maybe haven't seen the light of day and perhaps should. The Dread Pirate, you said, he used to be a farmer when I was a child. The horse bit me on the shoulder. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. That's so traumatic to have a horse bite you. Jeez. My brother was thrown from a horse. I think he was like 7 or 8 years old. And yeah, that was rough. Manish, I've done a little bit of that. I'm not officially by any means, but I do love it. I think it's so much fun. Christopher, it's fascinating to gain some awareness of our lineage. I'm a direct descendant of Roger Williams on my father's side. How cool. You know what's interesting, since you bring up lineage, there's something around understanding, to your point, around generations and how is it like, what are we taking from generational lineage that is so good and so positive that we can really capitalize on? And then what are some things that we actually need to distance ourselves from, and some almost like old patterns that need to be reworked and rewired in our brain? So to your point, it's so important to know, where did I come from? My grandparents, I'm so grateful for this. They've created little booklets from their great grandparents. So now I can go 5 generations back and just understand, where did we come from? And then it's on whose shoulders am I standing? And man, doesn't that just give us such a sense of gratitude? There's a book called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan. So, 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 so good. I have it on Audible, and frankly, I've listened to it, I think, 3 times, and read it also. Alex Hermosi, for those of you in the marketing space and business space, he talks about this, and I'm so glad, because I was wondering if I was crazy, but he does this, so it's fine. He reads the book while listening to it, and it just, when you're the audio, and then both the visual and audio is stored in different regions of the brain. So when you're doing both in concert with each other, it really solidifies in our memory. So anyways, I thought that that was cool. So The Gap in the Gain, the reason why that's just a really, really good book is because so much of gratitude is powered from looking back behind us and saying, man, look at how far I've come. And look at how far my family came, my parents came. Even today on the Crafting Calling podcast, I was talking with our guest, and she just said she now really has a deep appreciation for her mom, because her mom just worked so incredibly hard, because she comes from a family line of cleaning businesses. Her parents moved and immigrated in the US before she was born. She was born into the family, and they just have worked so hard, and they created a culture of hard work. And so now she gets to stand on the shoulders of that, and that generates gratitude. And so when we're focusing on the gain rather than the gap in our lives, gratitude is a propelling agent that moves us forward, rather than us just constantly looking at the gap and being like, I'm so far. It's like, how can you not be discouraged and live in kind of almost like a darker state, rather than living in the gain, which is just so encouraging. Um, Frido, thank you for joining. I'm so glad you're here. Um, I'm trying to say the names right. I feel like I'm probably gonna butcher it. I'm saying good to see you. Thank you for joining. Um, 36 RO. Uh, deep question. um, hmm. I'm just kind of looking through here. Manisha, I'm from just outside of Washington, D.C. So I'm in Northern Virginia, but I grew up in Maryland. I'm one of 6 kids, actually. God bless my parents. They're freaking amazing. J Flex, thank you. I'm glad you're here. ND, good, hi. Good to see you. Brandon, Bob, thank you guys for joining. Um, and then the Dread Pirate, Rob, you said, not bad idea. I'm reading a book like that. I'd be curious what book you are reading. Um, mm, Gammer Guru, good to see you. Dark Horse, fine weather. Um, y'all, I think it's really interesting, this whole concept of how do you define you. I like actually asking people when I meet them at networking events. Oh, it's always, what do you do? I love asking the question of, who are you? And that question really reveals how and where we place our values. What's the first what's the first answer? Like, I'd actually love to see here in the chat. Dark Horse, you said you just got here. We're talking about, frankly, we're hanging out. But we're also talking about, how do you define you? And I'd love to hear in the chat, literally, if we were in person and I said, who are you? What would you say? What do you love? What do you care about? What gets you passionate? One of my favorite quotes is that there's nothing more beautiful than a human soul that is set on fire. Isn't it so true? It's so cool. So I'd love to know, what are the things that just really get you passionate, and that it's life-giving to you, that you value, that is, I think of it as, whatever we feel like we're called to, whatever our mission is, those are the bowling pins in the alley. then our values are the guardrails that guide us forward. It's like bumpers, when you're taking your kid to the bowling alley and they can barely throw, and then they just kind of like roll it rather than the ball rolling into the gutters. The values serve as bumpers so that when the ball goes and hits it, it keeps you going back on to the direction of your goals. So this whole concept of vertical alignment, living with our compass pointed and navigated north, which is how I need to and want to live, where it used to be broken, navigating east and west, looking to everyone around me to give me my sense of validation and worth. Now it's like, okay, well, let me keep my eyes fixed straight ahead. Who do I want to be? What do I want to accomplish? What am I called to? Why am I here? Y'all, every single one of us has a reason why we're here. And so once we get clear on that, then we can then establish the values that are necessary to guide us forward onto those goals. So I just am gonna look here in the chat to see some of the responses. Um, the Dread Pirate Rob, you said 6 kids. I'm an only child. Sometimes I wish I had siblings because sometimes not so much, but I wish I had. But I have a lot of cousins. So big extended family. I love that. I think about, I don't have any children, but I would love to have a big family. There's something so special about that. Although I will say, if I had a lot of kids, I think it'd be hard to stay close with my siblings. So I'm like, maybe I don't. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm so grateful for my siblings. And my mom, man, that's what she did. That we were her career. We were her profession. She just invested so much in us. I'm so grateful for that. Benny, good to see you. I Yes. Yes, Benny. We actually were just, I don't know if you saw this earlier, but I'm going to be creating just a link. I have it somewhere on the ChristeneMarie.com website. I just don't know where, but we have a link so that you guys can fill out where you live. And then whenever I go to that town or city, we'll host a knowing dinner. So, uh, yeah, let me know where you live, and then it'd be fun. I'll drop a link probably tomorrow when I get back on here. Christopher, you said, I lost my definition when she died. Wow. I first, I'm so glad that you shared that. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that we were talking a couple nights ago around just grief and what gets lost, the parts of us that die along with our loved one who passes. It's interesting. I'd be curious your thoughts on this. What parts of us are dying that are actually necessary for then a rebirth? If we talk about this whole concept, I think it was the other day when we were talking about, Jordan Peterson says this. He's a Canadian psychologist, and it was a 3-hour podcast. It's one of my favorites I've ever listened to. It was dense. It was with him and Lex Friedman, and he effectively said, the Christ story, which is a representative for us, each one of us, we are intended to live in the power of God in us. And so part of that story is that Christ had to go, he didn't just die, he went into the gates of hell to get the keys of redemption. And so in the process of parts of us dying, we actually need to go through hell sometimes to then get those keys and reclaim the keys for the purpose of our own rebirth and redemption, and waking up and living fully alive. And so with that whole concept of like, what are those definitions of who are you? Sometimes we get to start from scratch, and there's something, I I think that that's something really actually quite profound. Like, you get to start. You get to create it, you know? Y'all, it's so hard. I was talking about this earlier when we're not traveling, when we're just in the same place, same people, same environment every day. It's so easy to just do the same thing and just show up the same way and to live on autopilot and never question anything, never think about much other than what we're doing the same thing every day. But when tragedy strikes, when something shifts, even something like losing a job, we're forced to look in the mirror. And we don't have to. So I guess I say we're forced, the mirror is presented to us, But then it's our choice. Am I going to look in the mirror? And so when something like loss comes about, it's like, okay, am I actually going to pick up the mirror? Am I going to look in it? And then am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to create a new definition? Y'all, when my husband left, I was so like, just like this little, I felt like a little kid. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what I wanted. And I even told my therapist at the time, I was like, I don't need anyone or anything. I'm good. I'm fine. I don't need anyone because I had lived so much of my life where I was the one that everyone needed. And so then when it came to me actually having real needs, I was like, what do I like, what does it mean to be human? Like, I just felt so out of touch and disassociated with myself. And so, in moments like this, where there's just so much pain and so much brokenness, this is like the moment where we get to decide, am I going to take off there's man, this is so meaningful to me. So, there's a biblical concept where it's God taking a heart of stone and making it a heart of flesh. And so the question is, are we willing to have hearts of flesh? Are we willing to feel again? Are we willing to love again? Do we even want that in the first place? And so with this whole question of how do you define you? Who do you even want to be? Have you ever thought about that? Because I hadn't. I had never thought, who do I want to be? What is my own ideal? What do I actually want? And we ask these questions for the purpose of loving others all the more. So I'm just gonna jump up. Sorry, I got lost in the chat, so I'm coming back over here. Um, Dr. Snow Leopard, good to see you. All right, I'm just looking here. Bob, thank you for coming on here. Okay. Polly, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Family is always first. Children are God's gifts. Oh, I love that. I love that response. Tar course, you live in California. Oh, where in California? Bob, my family has a house in Prince Edward Island. I love Prince Edward. Dark horse, put your phone away, get off social media. Yes, that's so honestly. It's almost like, man, is there anything more dangerous than social media, especially when you're in a time of grief? It's more isolating than ever when you're already feeling alone to then hop on and feel like no one understands, like no one sees you, like you're just really alone in this journey of life. Um, mm, Polly, you said, I think the part of us that hopes for them dies with them. We just have sorrow for their loss. I think you're right. I think there is a part of us that dies. And then the question is it ever possible to have that be reborn and resurrected? What would it look like? And I think that this actually, I'd be curious for just to hear your thoughts. What does it look like to honor the person that we love? What does it look like to honor them when they're gone? What would they want for us? And like truly, truly thinking about that. I think of my brother-in-law who was killed. He was the most vibrant person. And I think I actually honor him. The more vibrant I live, I actually think he loves that. I really, really do. Oh, I think he'd be really, really proud of who I am. And I think he'd be so proud of his wife, my sister. I think he'd be so proud of her. I think he'd be so proud of his daughter who's 11. She never met him. She was 3 weeks old when he was killed. And yet I think we're really honoring him. So what does it look like to honor the person who passed away? But I think you're right, Polly. Part of us dies with them. Christopher, you got me. I'm thinking. Y'all, my computer is about to die. Oh, Christopher, but Christopher Adams, you said, to best describe myself, I'm a walking testimony to a second chance in life after my suicide attempts 8 years ago. By the grace of God, I came to know his truth and love, so I try to share that daily. Wow. Man, that is honestly a walking testimony. Isn't that what we all are and can be if we so choose to be a walking testimony? I love the way you phrase that. That is honestly, it's so brave. Um, So thank you for sharing that. Thomas Simmons, are you in therapy? Yes, I am like a big believer. I think every human should have someone in their corner. 100%, whether it's a therapist or not, but I really, really love. I see probably like once a month I go to therapy. Um, so yes, I am. Tony, oh, hello from to the UK. I'm hoping to actually come and visit this summer. Once I've not traveled for 5 months. Um, Dark horse, we've all had heartache. What we do with it is super important. Yes. Guys, this is part of the reason why we're on this show together is so that we feel less alone, so that we c get ideas of how to do the work. Um, and then honestly encourage each other onward, There's something around coming together as a group that's so encouraging. So, JBB, freedom, peace, and solitude comes with being in the full life if you find yourself. Yes. Oh, I love that you said solitude. Freedom, peace, and solitude. And I would even, I mean, gosh, I would include in that list too, just so much love. Like we can give so much more when we're coming from that place. Y'all, I have my computer literally about to die. So I'm gonna hop off. Please come and join me tomorrow night. I'll be live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Uh, between 8:30 and 9 p.m. Eastern. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I am gonna save the chat so I can sync back on here. But literally it says your Mac will sleep soon unless plugged into a power outlet. So I'm gonna hop off. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. for A Course in Miracles. And then between 8:30 and 9 p.m. tomorrow evening for The Knowing Show. So until we meet again,